Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
The great thing about great cinema is that it can be very challenging, and that is what makes it very interesting. And it's almost like I usually, if I have to give, a comparison, it's like you can say like music, perhaps if you have listened to a lot of music, you'll appreciate classical music. It might not be the first time that you connect. You might be quite disoriented as well. But if it interested you enough or disturbed you enough to think that why is it there was something attractive about the film, but why is it that I didn't feel a connection? You can go two ways. One is that you can just say that, okay, then this filmmaker is not for me, this film is not for me. Or you can say that, you know what, I want to understand it. And you start reading and watching more, and you will find that you will start appreciating cinema like this.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Anything But Bollywood, where we talk to creators, filmmakers, and curators of the moving images. But it's with one condition, that they be working in spheres that are anything but Bollywood. So having said that, Bollywood is this ginormous monster that devours everything that's in its path, and we're podcasting out of Mumbai, so we will invariably bump into people who have a toe or a finger or a foot in Bollywood. So to deal with this contentious issue, we're introducing you to our Anything But Bollywood scoring, also known as ABS. So an Anand Patwardhan gets a 10-pack and Salman Khan gets a 0-pack. So our guest this week scores a 9-pack AB rating. She has the most amazing job ever, which I'm very jealous because she gets to watch films for a living. She's Deepti D'Cunha. She's a film programmer who programs contemporary Indian films for film festivals. Welcome to Anything But Bollywood, Deepti.
Thank you so much, Neha. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming. So the reason we're talking to her is because non-mainstream, non-Bollywood films, and if you're a small independent filmmaker, there's a question of where you screen your films and how you find an audience. So I really wanted to talk to Deepti about this and have her join us for the show. So Deepti, I wanted to start with what we have in common. Which is we first met because we both had the thing in common, which was we both dropped out of architecture school.
Yes.
So that was kind of exciting, and we both started exploring film at the same point. And then we connected recently, which a few months back. So I wanted to know about that journey from being an architecture school dropout to how you ended up being a film programmer, and you've been doing this for now 7 years.
Yes. Well, architecture as an education is excellent, and I can say that the dropping out of architecture that I took, the decision that I took was very, very late. I think I dropped out just before my thesis.
Wow, yeah, so you went through more years than
I think I did. It was a 10-semester course, and I think I did 9 out of 10 because I even completed my professional practice technically. But I think it came at a point where I really questioned life because I wasn't convinced that I had the passion to sustain it as a lifelong career, and that was mainly because I had classmates who were extremely passionate about architecture. I had gotten into architecture, without even giving it a thought. It was my friend was doing it. I happened to pass the exam, and so I went in. The first few years were excellent because it was freeing from the life of textbooks, and we at that time we were PCM and PCB students with high 12 standard courses, and suddenly we were thrown into a world where we could create and draw. But then when it went into the engineering part of it, I realized that maybe it was not.
Those first few years of architecture were very freeing.
Yes, and today I would give it my education in architecture a lot of credit, and also in a way architecture led me to films because while I used to get very stressed out about design, our college library had a few DVDs, and this was the time before the internet or before we knew anything about films. And also very close by there was a college, Mithibai College, where we had a professor called Professor Prabodh Parekh, who on Friday evenings I think he used to get films from NFAI and he used to show us world cinema, which I didn't know what it was about because I was a huge Bollywood fan. I'm born and brought up in Bombay, and I still am a huge fan of Bollywood. So really what I'm doing is not, there's never a conflict in my mind.
Right.
So I saw a few brilliant films that you could say changed my life. And they were very cliched films. It's almost like...
What were the films?
I think 2001 A Space Odyssey, however cliched that sounds. But those are the prints that come out.
It is an amazing film.
Yeah, and also I saw Blow Up by Antonioni. And I think for me, watching Blow Up by Antonioni... it really opened a space in my head. I physically felt like something had opened up in my brain. And later on, of course, I realized that I naturally tend towards films made by architects. I didn't know Antonioni was an architect.
Oh, really? I didn't know that either.
And also, I loved Apichatpong. He studied architecture.
Right.
And, also the way architecture trains you, it makes you look at form. And even I was approaching film through form and not necessarily through narrative. So that's where I realized that I loved film. It was not even something I thought would end up as being a career decision. All I knew at that point in time is that I could not be an architect, and I was very scared of getting that degree because I thought if I get that degree, which I would have eventually got if I submitted my thesis, I would have to work as an architect. And so in complete defiance, and I don't know what gave me the courage to do that. I just walked up to the principal's office and I asked for a leaving certificate. And I came home back with that leaving certificate saying I am not going to do this. But of course I had a lot of advisors and friends who said that
listen, everyone would have told you that you were stupid.
Yes, very stupid, and don't throw away 5 years of your education. And there's always a joke in my family that I could never complete anything I started. And I think I worked with a firm which was called Moof at that time, and that was great. But I realized that, there was a lot of procrastination. It took me so much to just sit and start work, and I wanted to end that. At that point in time, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to disappear. I didn't want to meet people who knew me as an architect. Luckily, there was no social media at that time, so it was easier to disappear. And what I did was I think on my 25th birthday, I realized that I didn't have money to celebrate my birthday, and that was a real wake-up call. So I immediately went and I took a job in a call center. And I worked in a call center for close to 2 years. Started off with a small process, Barclays, and I think I learned a lot about software, about talking to people. It was very exciting. I was only working nights. During the day, I didn't have to stay awake. I could avoid everyone possible. And there came a point where they really appreciated my work, and they wanted me to promote me. There's the internal job promotion. And I had to sit for that promotion, and I realized that I don't have a degree. And every corporate requires you to be a graduate. And so even though I had studied architecture technically for almost 5 years, I still was considered a 12th pass. So I had to go to Mumbai University.
Right, that's when we bumped into each other again. Because we were both trying to do the same thing, which is get that piece of paper that would legitimize us.
Because all the doors were shut. What do you do when you don't have a degree, and how do you grow in your job profession? And it was again a huge wake-up call, but I was more confident now because I was earning some money. And then I said, okay, I will do I'll study history and psychology. And I did my correspondence course in Mumbai University. So it was really embarrassing because my brother, who's 6 years younger than me, was, a topper in Mumbai University, and he was getting his degree and I was still studying to get mine.
Right. And it's a 3-year-long course.
Yeah. So I had to quit the job to give my exams. And when I quit the job to give my exams, I got a call from Prabodh Parekh. And he had heard that I was interested in film, and he was starting a small NGO. When you say small, it was him and me. Okay. That was his idea, and he called it Katha Center for Film Studies. And the idea was to show films in Bombay. That's it. And he said, would you like to work with me? And I was like, okay, I will. And the salary was really less. But he had a very great model, which basically meant that we used to reach out to curators around, or you could say cinephiles around Bombay. And each one was given a day to show their favorite films. Okay. And we would take something like Alliance Français as a screening venue, and we tried the 7-day festival. And so I was just coordinating with them, and I ended up meeting some 3 or 4 very passionate people talking about films that I had never heard of, and taking names of filmmakers that I didn't know existed. But I was very attracted to those conversations, and he used to get a lot of DVDs, so I started watching along with them, and it was quite a success. I think that Katha Center for Film Studies, that what we did.
I remember hearing about it. Is it still operating? I remember hearing about it like long back.
It did run for a few years, and it was a great cultural space. But also what it did was, I do meet young filmmakers today who actually were inspired by Katha. And here I would like to point out that this is how great cinema is. It's such a powerful medium. It's such an attractive medium that when you come across, excellence in that medium, you realize you can push yourself further. You want to be a creator.
Right.
But for me, the trauma of trying to create an architecture for 5 years, I knew very well that I didn't want to be a filmmaker, because I could not imagine myself sitting over an idea and actually trying to see the fruition of that idea. Right. Now, during Katha, I think we had to give the office was in Delhi. So Prabodh once told me that, well, let's go to Delhi. We have to give the accounts. And we happened to go there. And, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was enjoying my stint at Katha. And Osian Cinefan was going on at that time, which Osian Cinefan was one of the biggest festivals in India, focusing on Asian cinema. Now, whenever you see world cinema, you always end up watching European cinema, or Hollywood.
Right.
You don't know much of Asian cinema. And I registered for the festival, and I think I watched 45 films during that festival. And
that must have been fun.
It was an amazing experience. When on the last day of the festival, when the last film got over, I felt a complete sense of loss. And also, I suddenly realized that this is the space I want to belong to. After 10 days of being in Osian Cinefan, when I had to come back to Bombay, and I felt really empty, and I reflected on it, and I realized that this is the space I belong to. I think my struggle in my 20s was that I never fit in anywhere. I never fit into architecture. I was never so passionate about it, but I used to do my work well. I never fit into, I loved the whole call center experience, but, I don't know if I saw a career in that. And then when I went to this film festival, I was like, you know what? I want to work for film festivals. And I didn't even know what that meant at that point in time. So I think that decision that I made, that I'll work for film festivals, is stuck till now. And I'm very, very stubborn about it.
But it's amazing that it took you so long. How old were you by the time you kind of discovered this?
I think 27 or 28, and I felt very old. And so when I came back to Bombay, also I had seen a lot of films by MAMI Kaul, and I knew the name. And I got to know that MAMI Kaul works with Osian Cinefan Film Festival. So I applied to that company, Osian's in Bombay.
Okay.
And it was an art house, actually, art auction house.
Right.
And the festival used to happen only in Delhi. So in Bombay, I used to go to work to Churchgate every day. We had to be there by 9 and work till 6 in the evening. And I was completely into the art world, just handling auctions.
So you didn't have anything to do with the film festival?
No, only 1 week before the film festival, I was sent there, and I started off maybe as a jury secretary who takes care of, people from the jury. But it was such an incredible festival, because I remember when I was jury secretary. Today, when I think about the people I was, a jury secretary to, they're really big guys,
Right.
Like there's the writer of Edward Yang's films, Union Jin, and and we met a lot of talent. And I said, this is what I want to do. And I worked with Osians for 3 years. And I think at the end of the 3rd year, I started feeling very frustrated, because I was only going there as a volunteer or a jury secretary, and not really, becoming a part of the process of, or not growing really, because I was handling the auctions. I think at a moment of great frustration on a Sunday, I wrote an email to Money Kaul. And I just wrote an email. I mean, I was in awe of him because I used to see him coming to this office and he was this great big personality and this big filmmaker. Never had the guts to go and tell him, I love your films. What do I tell him, because I was so unsure about. But I wrote him an email and I said, Mr. Money Kaul, I really want to work with you and I want to work for the film festival, and can I work with you? And I don't know what that email was. It was as basic as that. And then within 10 minutes, he gave me a call. And he said, hello, Deepti, you wrote to me? And I said, yes, Mr. Money Kaul. So he said, okay, will you come to Delhi? So I said, but sir, I have work in Bombay. He said, you don't worry. You come to Delhi. I have something to discuss. I said, okay, great. So I went to, luckily I was sent to Delhi. We spoke. And he told me that he had this idea for a film festival. Now, he was a festival director of a festival that was...
I didn't really know this about him, that he was at Osian's. I mean, of course, the Money Kaul is a name that we've all heard and his films are like... but I had no idea that he was involved in festival like curation and setting all of this up.
Well, he was offered the position of festival director. Osian's first was actually led by Aruna Vasudev, who's like a really big name in she, Latika Padgaonkar, Indu Shrikant, created this festival which focused on Asian cinema. And it was a result of a journal that they had called Cinemaya, which was tracking Asian films for a long time. And the festival was an eventuality because they wanted to show the films that they were writing about. And actually, if you see today, it is such an important... What they've done is... so great, because a lot of Asian talents were actually discovered at Osian Cinefan. And also when I watched films, it gave me a whole Asian perspective. I had no idea that Asian films could be so amazing. To date, I'm a huge fan of Taiwanese cinema, of Chinese cinema. I mean, the way they make their films is very different from what is made in Europe. And so when I went to meet Money Kaul, he told me he was, in a conundrum. Basically, Osian Cinefan needed to get more visibility. And he was told that he needs to get some Bollywood into the festival. And Mani was very he didn't know the Bollywood space because he had not followed that space at all. So he just asked me one question and he said, Deepti, do you think do you watch Bollywood films? I said, yes, I do. And then he said, okay, who do you think is a great director from Bollywood, upcoming director? And immediately I said, Anurag Kashyap, without doubt, because Dev D had just released.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, will you be able to name 4 or 5 other directors? And I was really thinking, and, I said, there is Zoya Akhtar, she's come out with Luck by Chance, it's very interesting. And then there's Imtiaz Ali has made a film, and Dibakar is there. And these were actually very, very early on in their careers.
Right, this was their first film.
Yes. So he said, okay, let's curate something. So I said, what does that mean? So he said, see, I am going to propose something which says that there is going to be a leap in mainstream. And let's not call it new wave because I was new wave.
Right.
But let's call it new stream.
Right. I read that. I thought that was an interesting word.
And he was very good with, curating and coming up with ideas. And he said, let's call it new stream cinema. But we need to give it more gravitas rather than just showing films. So I will talk to GNU students and I will get a moderator on the panel. You try to get these filmmakers on board and we will discuss their films, and we are going to propose that these are the directors who are going to take Bollywood forward and tomorrow are going to have like the really big films. At that time, the 100 crore term had not yet come out, And he told me one thing. He said, Deepti, you are free to use my name the way you want, and just send out those emails and invite them to the festival. And I remember at that time, Abhay Deol was a very big star. He was like the face of the new cinema that was coming out. So we said, okay, we started thinking. Now what I realize is actually how festival programming happens. At that time, it was all very organic. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I also met with Anurag Kashyap, and because he was a very close friend of Money Kaul. And Anurag said, yes, I'll put you in touch with these directors. And Vishal Bhardwaj also was one of them. And he said, I'll put you in touch with these directors. And he said something very interesting. He said, we are very good friends. And in fact, we show each other our films before release and we take feedback from each other. And I was like, wow, so It's at that time, they were so new in their careers that, it was so disconnected. We didn't know there was any connection.
Right.
And the festival was supposed to happen, I think, in July, but because of lack of funds, it didn't happen in July. It got pushed to October, but that gave us enough time to actually curate a very good section. And I must say it was a huge success.
Actually, I remember, like, at that time, there was a big buzz about Osians. So I want to actually get into more of this. I want to go back to a question you had, which you said earlier, which was about film being more about form than about narrative. So we're going to come back to that. We're taking a break now. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says. A show that encapsulates everything in human history, from the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien, who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday on the IVM podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts on. You get one Banana Vada free with every podcast. Right. I'll just check that.
We're back again on Anything But Bollywood, and we're talking to Deepti D'Cunha. So actually that brings me to the question of, what does a film programmer do? Like, what does the job entail?
Well, see, when I look at me as a programmer, I work for several festivals as a consultant. So my main job entails sourcing of films from all over India. And now it's coming towards South Asia, because I'm extending my sourcing to South Asia. And we look at submissions. And I think you basically try to pick out films which show some level of quality in the craft. And, you try to understand the vision of the festival, because, people talk about film festivals as being this blanket term, film festival.
Right.
When actually every film festival has to differ from the other.
Right, and they create their own kind of brand.
They have their own vision, which is usually, the vision of the festival director or the artistic director, who decides that this is what my festival is going to be for, and that is communicated to programmers, and we try to get the best films that could be a fit to the vision of that festival.
So isn't it done by a committee then? Like, is it a selection committee? How does all of that work?
Well, different festivals have different models. So when you see IFFI, which is India's oldest, largest, and the official festival of India, International Film Festival of India, which happens in Goa, they follow the selection committee model, where you have a lot of submissions coming in and various selection committee members who then might be rating the film according to per screening, and then you put a whole package together. But you do have other festivals like MAMI, which is the Mumbai Film Festival, the MAMI Mumbai Film Festival, which actually is more curated, whereas you have the programmer who decides on which. So it's really the responsibility of the programmer, or now it is programmers. We are three of us.
Okay, so then it's a decision amongst the three of you.
Yes.
And is there how do you negotiate when there's disagreements? And
that's the most fun part. That's the most fun part of programming, because each one of us. But it's also not that difficult, because once you do know cinema well,
right?
You cannot ignore the fact that this is a great film. So it's you can't say it, because we are the first watchers of films. As programmers, we are not watching films once the opinion is out. We have to see it directly after the filmmaker makes it. Very often we see rough cuts of films. And we see films without sound complete, maybe without the edit complete.
Oh really? I didn't know that. You accept entries that are in a rough cut stage.
Especially like for festivals which request a world premiere. A world premiere basically means that the first ever time the film is going to screen to an audience is at that festival.
Right.
We have to source films in the rough cut. And it so happens that, you watch this marvelous film and you're just hoping and praying that some really bad background music doesn't, ruin it.
Yeah.
But as programmers, it's not in our position to tell a filmmaker or give feedback to a filmmaker.
Okay.
So sometimes I have been very disappointed with the final cut of the film, because I know exactly what was cut out for the film to, retain its length. And sometimes you're very surprised that a filmmaker has managed such a great edit that it has taken the film, to another level. So, I think those are things that we grapple with, and we still try to, get the best selection out.
starting out in this career, I'm sure, would have been difficult since this job is really a very niche job.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, exist. Like, nobody says, I want to become a film festival programmer. So did you have mentors along the way that, you mentioned Professor Prabodh Parekh, and were there any others who...
Well, I would say the person I could truly call my mentor was Mani Kaul. He saw the potential in me being a film programmer. And I was not considering film programming as such. I didn't know what I was doing. But when he gave me an opportunity with Newsstream after that, he was very encouraging. What happened is immediately after the festival, we didn't know it was the last edition of the festival. And the Osian Cinefan actually, because of some financial crisis, since it was linked to the art world and the recession had just happened,
This was which year?
2008, I think.
Okay.
I'm very bad with the years, I'm sorry, but I think it's 2000. But and also the festival model was such that it was completely funded by the owner of the festival, Mr. Neville Tully,
right.
who was very passionate about the festival, but it was not viable because, see, a film festival, goes into crores of rupees. It's like a film production,
right,
almost. So when we got to know that the next edition of the festival is not going to happen, and there might be a gap year, I immediately replied to that email saying that I'm quitting. I think which came as a big surprise to everyone. But then I was so stubborn that I am only going to work for film festivals because I finally figured out what I want to do with my life, that I quit and I sat at home for 8 months. I said no to every kind of job, whether it was production or whether it was anything. I said no, something will come up. There will be a film festival that comes up. And after 7 or 8 months, I got a call from Mani Kaul and he said, "Hi Deepti, I'm in Bombay. Do you want to meet for lunch?" And I said, "Oh, great, after so long, let's meet for lunch." And, we had a very wonderful relationship in the sense that I never told him I had watched any of his films. I never told him I was a great fan. So he really thought of me as this, young person who loves Bollywood and who loves films, who works hard. And we were really like buddies, And he called me up and he said, "Yeah, come, let's meet for lunch. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine." So I said, okay. And I went to town and I remember he introduced me to a person called Marco Mueller, whom I had no idea who he was. And we were just chatting over lunch and Marco started asking me, he's like, "So what do you do, Deepti?" So I said, "Nothing, I was working with money." And then he said, "Okay, so what have you been up to?" So I said, "I've been watching films." And he said, "What film had you watched?" And just the previous day, I had watched Mysterious Object at noon by Appy Chatpong, And that film was still going on in my head. So, and when anyone asks me about a film, I'm so passionate. I just start talking about the film. So I started, I don't know if you know Appy Chatpong, but he's the greatest director and he's from Thailand. And, this film is like a diagram and, you could almost sketch. It was amazing. And then, I started talking about Michel Gondry's Science of Sleep. And then Mani said, "Okay, Deepti, let's go for dinner to another friend's place." And then we went to another friend's place for dinner. And me and Marco, Marco was talking about this and that. And then before leaving, Mani told me, he's like, "You know who Marco Mueller is?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Go Google him." So I said, okay. And I went home and I Googled him and I realized he's the festival director of Venice Film Festival. Not only that, he has produced Appy Chatpong's Tropical Malady. And I was like, oh my God, I just had lunch with the festival director of Venice. What I didn't know is that Marco had come to India looking out for a programmer for Indian cinema. And what happened over lunch was basically an interview.
Nice.
So then I remember Mani saying that, "See, listen, he is looking out for someone. And I think, I had recommended your name to him, but he's interviewing other programmers as well." So I was just like, it's too much to dream about going to Venice. So I was just very grateful. And I said, "You're so sweet. Thank you so much. It was a great opportunity." And that's it. Of course, I don't even know what that is. And then the next, after a few months, I get a mail from Marco saying, "Hi Deepti, this is Marco here. Are you going to be at the Film Bazaar?" And in Goa. And of course I was not going to be at the Film Bazaar in Goa. I had nothing to do there.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, Marco said that. I don't mind going and meeting him. So I remember I went to Goa and I stayed in a really small place filled with lizards. I don't know what. That time the Film Bazaar was not too expensive a place to get in. It was a really small place. So I went to the Film Bazaar and I met Marco and for breakfast and he spoke to me again. And then there is a place called Knowledge Series where they call festival directors from very different festivals to talk. And while he was speaking, I remember Marco saying, "Oh, by the way, I have a good announcement to make. I have found the programmer for Indian cinema," And I was like, wow, great. And then after the talk, I went and told him, I said, "It's great. Congratulations, you found it." And, I was thinking it's one of the other programmers who are well known. You have Deepti D'Cunha in the profession. You have Meenakshi Shetty in the profession. You have Raman Chawla. I thought, and he said, "Oh, but that's you." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, you're coming to Venice."
Wow. That's a nice
next
way to
year.
find out.
And it was, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Of course, I'm eternally grateful to Mani for convincing me that, there is a profession like this and, that I could do it. And for Marco just giving me a chance, not knowing. And I was very honest. I said, "But, Marco, I don't know how to do programming."
Right.
He said, "You don't worry. I know Indian cinema well," which actually now I realize he knows Indian cinema too well. He's been coming to India for past 30 years.
Wow.
He was the person who took Mani Kaul's films to Europe. He had done a Guru Dutt retrospective in Europe. He knows many filmmakers. He was the reason Anurag Kashyap was on the jury of Venice Film Festival. And, he follows Indian cinema very closely. And he literally handheld me through the process. All he said was that, "Give out a call of entries from NFDC. And we are in Venice Film Festival is very good terms with NFDC. Nina is a great friend. And when the submissions come through, watch all the films. I'll come to Bombay for a week. Let's discuss and let's pick out a film." And if, and then he told me something very matter of fact. He said, "See, listen, it's okay even if we don't have a film from India in Venice, because it's very difficult for Indian films to make it."
Right.
So there was no pressure, that I need to find something. I worked.
But you ended up finding a film, which was Anhe Gore Dadan.
Yeah, that was
the first kind of international film festival that you traveled with that film.
Yes, it was very exciting for me because I remember I went all out. Trying to source films, I didn't know how to source films, but I started looking around for filmmakers who were artists, who had any kind of short work, interesting work. And at that time, NFDC was producing Anhe Gore Dadan. I had heard from Gurvinder, from another very dear friend, and you could almost say mentor, Raman Chawla, who was working with me at Cinefan.
But wasn't Gurvinder Mani Kaul's student as
he
well?
He was, but I hadn't known that connection when I connected with him at that time. But yes, we ultimately we realized that, of course, it's a very, very small world.
Yeah.
And, when we had that screening at NFDC and... I must admit, when I first saw Anhe Gore Dadan, I didn't understand the film. I realized I need a lot of film learning to do when it especially comes to Indian cinema. Though I had been following another filmmaker called Amit Datta, which is... Actually, there's another aspect to it. I had also done my film appreciation course in NFAI for 1 month. And at that time, I think Amit Datta came and showed his diploma films.
I've always heard a lot about Amit Datta. He's like a god amongst like all FTII students. Yeah. He's a god. But I have not seen any of his films.
It's very difficult to actually get access to his work. But I remember he had a screening of his diploma film there called Kramasha. And I remember watching the film and I was completely blown away. I didn't understand anything, but I thought it was really amazing, just the visuals. And he presented a paper called Towards the New Indian Form. And after that, I just went up to him and I spoke to him and I said, I really like this film, but I didn't understand anything. So he said, perhaps because you don't know much about Indian arts and aesthetics. And I was like, yeah, what is that? Because we are so Western. And when it comes to cinema, we are seeing so much of European cinema. And, as a medium, it's come to us from the West, the cameras. And you go into those modes of watching films. And I remember when I know that I don't know something, it really disturbs me. So I enrolled in a course for Indian arts and aesthetics, which is the aim that I would understand Amit's films better. And I also had a chance to meet him during the Katha screenings where he presented Tropical Malady. That time I didn't know Mani Kaul and I just happened to invite him to present Tropical Malady. So yeah, there are a lot of these
But maybe you can explain Anhe Gore Dadan to me, because even I also... while I appreciated many things about it, I loved the mood of it and the pace of it, and those are things I appreciated about it. But for me, beyond a point, it didn't connect.
Well, that's very, very difficult to do because...
no, I'm not really asking for an explanation. But I guess maybe the context...
Well, I think, when we do approach cinema and we look very hard to connect, what happens is we try to connect to an actor and an actor's emotions.
Right.
And I think that's our film criticism is such that we watch a film and say, that one acted so well, or that one, emoted so well. But cinema is not necessarily about that. There is a whole tradition of cinema that is not... actor driven or actor oriented, and it can be a lot about space and time and about the medium. And I think people who have watched films by Bresson or Mani Kaul or Kumar Sani or Arvind, the thing is, if something doesn't connect, your relationship with cinema, I feel, does not have to end with whether you understood something. It's just like art.
No, it's like art. No, that's the thing. Art. That's why I said I could appreciate things about it.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I found it like it wanted to keep me at a distance, but maybe that was I don't know if that was the intention but that's what it kind of did.
That is a fair enough assessment. It's fine. You don't have to connect with every acclaimed film that comes out. But you have to recognize that is also cinema. And you have to recognize that, the great thing about great cinema is that it can be very challenging.
Right.
And that is what makes it very interesting. And it's almost like I usually, if I have to give, a comparison, it's like, you can say like music, perhaps if you have listened to a lot of music, you'll appreciate classical music.
Right.
It might not be the first time that you connect. You might be quite disoriented as well. But if it interested you enough or disturbed you enough to think that why is it there was something attractive about the film, but why is it that I didn't feel a connection? You can go two ways. One is that you can just say that, okay, then this filmmaker is not for me, this film is not for me. Or you can say that, you know what, I want to understand it. And you start reading and watching more, and you will find that you will start appreciating cinema like this. So it's not very easy only on a conversation to give you points that you should connect.
Right, no, that's not... but it was just to kind of get it's the other side esoteric. Is almost I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit. But just to kind of get a context for people who find it inaccessible, to maybe why you should explore it.
I think it's another expression of a form in that medium, but it's also, like you said, it's very atmospheric. Okay, also it presents Punjab, we had so much talk about Udta Punjab recently. Yeah. You see, Ane Gore Dadan, it is presenting Punjab and the villages in Punjab the way it is.
It is.
It is not...
It's there's nothing...
those events are not happening.
Right, there's a complete honesty about it.
Yes, and it's almost like, yes, it is a very different rhythm than what we are used to. And, Punjab need not be about happiness and, joyful celebration. There is a lot of stress, there's a lot of depression, there are things which are not working. And I think the mood of Ane Gore Dadan, it evokes it very strongly. And also there are fabulous frames in the film. If you're very sensitive to the aesthetics of framing, that film is...
it's shot by Satya Nagpal, who actually I worked with. So I had actually seen that film, because I was going to end up working with him. So it's beautifully shot.
And his second film, Chauthi Koot, is easier to connect because it has a story and, it has a very emotional core because you do have, if you've seen the film, you realize how he's talking about the dog. And he talks about something very important and he focuses it on the story of one family who has to make a decision of killing their pet or not. And it might not be like in a melodramatic... We are so used to melodrama. We are so used to music highlighting, underlining what we should feel. And when you watch this film, it's a different way of experiencing that emotion, but can be a very deep emotion. So
it takes me back to that thing of watching a film for form versus narrative. So I wanted to know what you meant by form. So I guess you would say this is kind of what you mean by that, right?
See, there is for me, it's more like I'm very aware of the camera and it's a construction of an image, right? The film. I'm always excited when someone is trying to do something completely new, create a new image, because there are only that many stories. And there is a way of filmmaking which is already established, and you say that, this is the way you do it, the long shot, mid shot, close up.
That's kind of the mainstream.
Yeah, and it's like, the textbook kind of filmmaking. And then there are those who look at the possibilities of cinema and they explore a possibility through editing or, through the way they use the camera, or through camera distance, through sound, and you get incredibly new forms, and styles of approaching it, which then if they are successful gets, copied by, or not copied, or you could almost say like copied is a very wrong word. It's an evolving medium. It's a very young art form. It's only 100 years old. So, there are people
who gets appropriated.
Or people do get influenced, or they try that again, and then we start becoming familiar with it, but it's very exciting for me to see a filmmaker approach a film in a very new way.
What's a recent film that you've seen that you've been excited about, that has maybe done this, experimented more with the form rather than the narrative?
Actually, not in a very, very big way, but there are always these small, strides that happen. I think in recent years, right now, I think last week we had a film in Rotterdam called Sexy Durga by Sanal Sasidharan. He's a Malayalam-based filmmaker. His previous film, An Off-Day Game, was a very powerful film. And this film called Sexy Durga also, what he's done with a very simple story. I think it is very exciting.
What's the film about?
It's about harassment of women on the empty streets of like a city. It need not be Kerala, but of a city. About how roads are, a space for men in India, especially at night. And
Sounds interesting.
and the way he's taken it's a one night story about two people who are eloping, and they need a lift from one place to the other, because there's no public transport, and you have just people who are harassing her, because she the woman called Durga happens to be a woman, and that is enough license for someone to harass. And just the ride to the station, the harassment, it almost becomes like a horror film.
Wow.
So that is very exciting. You have actually so many Court was very interesting, in the way it
I loved Court. It was, I really
in terms of its
enjoyed it.
screenplay, the way he decided. You're seeing a very assured director when you see Court, because
Court, of course, got the criticism that it was made for another market.
That will always
for
happen.
International market, but which it did kind of succeed in that sense, right?
Very much, yeah.
So you were involved with that to some extent, with the...
Well, I can't say it was a very small involvement, and more like a coincidence. What happened was that Chaitanya was very kind to, send me the film to watch it, even though he was not interested in the festival that I was working in at that time, which is Rome Film Festival. And
his film went to Venice, right?
Yes. He was very clear that he wanted to go to Venice because he was already in touch with the programmer of Venice at that time. And I requested for the film because I'd heard that this is a really good film. And he sent me the DVD, but he said very clearly that, you can watch it if you want, but it's not for, your festival. And when I saw the film, I have to say, I was like too excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a director who knows what he's doing, and it is such a powerful film. And it almost like I didn't know what to do after I watched the film. Usually what I do is after I watch a film, the next DVD goes in and I watch the next film, because you just go on and you make your notes, but very rarely you come across a film where you cannot work anymore, and you need to just keep quiet and think about the film. So I wrote him an email. And I said, can I please meet you? Which is again something I never do, because I just wanted to meet someone who, had made the film. And it's just that I live in 7 bungalows and I'm very accessible to new talent, because it just seems there's incredible cinema coming out of Versova and Aram Nagar and everyone, or Veera Desai, or everyone is around. So I said, okay, let me meet him. And we met over a coffee. And I said, congratulations, you're going to Venice. And he said, yeah, thank you. And I said, so how are you, who is the world sales agent of your film? So he said, what? Like, I don't have a world sales agent. And I realized that he thought that, wow, this is it. I got into Venice.
Right.
And now, everything will be, that's all you aim for, a great festival. And I told him, no, I mean, festivals are a starting point. You need someone to represent your film, and I really think your film, could win awards. And he was like, really, being very humble. And he was saying, oh, no, of course not. I'm just happy. And it just happened that a week back, I happened to meet someone who was thinking of moving to India. And she was the producer of, she had worked with Memento, which is one of the biggest world sales agents in the world. And because I've been in this profession for long enough, I was a huge fan of the catalogue of Memento. I know this all sounds like jargon, but you have world sales agents who have catalogues of films, which they then sell to territories, or they give it to film festivals for a certain screening fee. And every world sales agent has a special kind of a catalogue and certain directors that they promote. Who are their directors. And I always was in awe of the Memento slate. And I always wanted an Indian film to, in a very weird way, I was like, I wish Memento takes an Indian film someday. And when I happened to meet her, she said that, I'm moving to India and I don't know what I should do. And, and even I didn't know what advice to give her. And she said, I worked with Asghar Farhadi, and I have worked with Noori Bilge Ceylan as producers on their film. And I was like, okay, let me see if there are some opportunities. And then I see Court. Basically, I met Chaitanya, and, I told him that, see, I've met this young girl called Alexa. She used to work with Memento. And I think Memento is a great world sales agent, which I think at that time for Chaitanya also was some kind of jargon. He didn't know what I was talking about. Or he didn't really care. I said, can I please show this film to Alexa? And maybe Memento will take it. And maybe it will be a part of the catalogue. And maybe it will travel. So he was like, I think liked my enthusiasm. And he said, yes, Deepti, just go ahead and do it. Like, it's fine. I'm in Venice anyway. And I remember I called Alexa. She was back in Paris, and I said, Alexa, can you please watch a film that I'll show you? I think it's a great film. And she watched the film and she called me back and she said, this is an amazing film. And I said, yes, it's gotten into Venice. Do you think Memento would be interested? And she said, I don't know, let me go to the Memento office and find out. So she actually took that initiative. She went there. I don't think initially Memento was very excited because it really wasn't a part of, their strategy to acquire Indian films. But from what I heard later, there was a very young girl who had just joined who watched the film. She really liked it. So they gave the film to her and it became a part of Artscope Memento, some a label which is only for festivals, and all of this was happening before Venice. And then I think it won 2 awards at Venice by 2 independent juries, and the rest is history because Memento completely saw the potential of this film and sent it.
So that film really traveled, right?
It really traveled. Because Memento's network also would be around 200-250 film festivals around the world.
Not only film festivals, there were screenings. They bought the rights. There were screenings as well.
I don't know about the screenings, but I think there was a lot of.
When I was in New York, I went to Film Forum, and it was an exchange over, like it was going to be playing.
So I think that whole network played because everyone knew about. Court. Everyone knew Memento was repping Court. And I think it went on to win, if I'm not mistaken, 35 international awards across the globe.
Well, it was very well deserved.
Yes. So I think anyone who needs a screening then contacts the world sales agent and says, can we have a screening of the film? Because now the aspiration, there's so many audiences who want to watch the film, and you have information on who has the festival rights of the film. And and luckily, it, I think made enough money for Chaitanya to plan a release in India, and then of course he won the national award, which also helped him a lot. And today it is considered one of the landmark films in the last decade, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's quite a event, I think. It is very exciting.
Yeah, but for me it was something that, it was just something that I tried and it happened, but it's not possible with always. It's very tough.
Yeah, so actually I wanted to ask you then, do you have the way you deal with filmmakers, is there a boundary that you keep, or how do you negotiate that relationship? Because I'm sure you have, since you're saying you live in Warsaw, I'm sure you have everybody coming to your doorstep, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is I work from home. I don't work from an office, so it's really not the most convenient place to meet filmmakers. And secondly, I personally don't feel it's important to meet a filmmaker. I do not, as a rule, personal rule, meet a filmmaker before I have seen his or her film. And I think I maintain a huge distance. I'm sure people find me very inaccessible, and I have an email account. I am not on Facebook. So I've never been on Facebook. I am on Twitter. And, the idea is that I first watch the film, and I do meet filmmakers actually only at the film bazaar, because that's where they all come in. I think it's important to meet at a professional setup. One of the main reasons is that, I really have a soft corner for all filmmakers. I respect them tremendously. There's such great young talent, and I do not want to, meet a filmmaker and in a way sympathize with the struggle and then try to,
push the film because
actually,
of that.
I can't really push films because I work for few festivals and I can only program for those festivals. I do not do festival strategy. I'm very clear, because festival strategy is very complex.
What is festival strategy?
So festival strategy is, people, there are festivals called A-list festivals and B-list
so that's A-list would be like the Cannes and
the oldest festivals in the world.
And
like Cannes, Venice, Berlin, Toronto, Telluride, and Locarno, and
where does Sundance fit in?
Sundance, yes. So basically festivals which can say that we can confidently say that we want only world premieres or at the most international premieres, and who assure you great press and also would assure you distribution. So these are festivals which have markets associated with them, where a lot of distributors.
But is that really assured? Like if you're into one of those festivals, you're assured distribution?
See, the thing is, if you're in Cannes or Venice or Locarno, if you are even in the selection, it's easily you could travel to 100 festivals around the world. And there is a parallel economy for film festivals. The difference is that in India, we are so grateful to be in any film festival that we never ask for something called a screening fee. Now, you have to understand that in India, we are one of the very few countries who are lucky enough to have a homegrown audience for our films. We make our content here, and it is our biggest audiences in our country. A lot of countries around the world do not have audiences for films from their region. And those filmmakers and in those independent industries have to depend on the film festival circuit. And what happens is, when their film is selected or invited to the festival, they ask for a screening fee. So you could, and if you have a world sales agent, the world sales agent negotiates the screening fee, because they have a better idea of, the vision of different festivals, the audience tastes of different countries, of different festivals, and then, they negotiate the amount of fee that has to be paid for screenings.
So would, like, an Indian filmmaker, they wouldn't be able to demand this on their own? They would need like an agent and
yes,
all of that?
Yes, I think that's a very important point, because what happens is, with Indian films, we are very happy to be selected in a festival. And, we are very grateful, literally. And so we go without asking for a screen fee. Also, we feel very awkward, because we feel like, oh, wow, the festival's invited me, I'm going to get audiences, and so we miss out on that part. A world sales agent will never give a film for free. They'll say, no, I mean, a film, you are showing a film to your audiences, you have to pay for it, it's content you pay for. So yes, it would help independent filmmakers to find a world sales agent, and I think Film Bazaar as a platform is precisely for that, to connect world sales agents with independent filmmakers.
So we are going to take a quick break now. We'll be right back.
What's the best new restaurant in town?
Which bar sucked?
What's the worst new Hindi film?
What's the most obscure thing to do on the weekend?
And what's the most interesting new walking tour?
If you want to know how to make the most of Bombay, listen to the podcast by thedailypow.com. We are Pronuti,
Amit,
and Purva.
We're your guide to what to do, see, and eat in the city. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you prefer, and on thedailypow.com.
Welcome back to Anything But Bollywood. We are with Deepti D'Cunha. I wanted to ask you, from the filmmakers you've kind of worked with, are there any filmmakers you admire? And
I admire filmmakers, okay? I admire their courage. Filmmaking is a profession that is still not completely acceptable in India, and every filmmaker
but
has...
still you feel like it's still not acceptable? Because I feel like from when I started, which was whenever 15, 16 years ago, back then it was even less acceptable. Today it's like everybody is doing a media course. I'm like, what did you study? I did media. Like, it's very acceptable to at least study it in some form.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, see, when you're talking about Mumbai, maybe, because Bombay is such a, film-oriented city.
Right.
But when I am watching cinema, I'm watching from all over India. And it's usually, filmmakers who've had to really either convince their parents, break ties with family, leave professions, really struggle, and then get their film out. So I have great respect for a filmmaker because it is a courageous decision, and I do know that because being a film programmer was a strange decision, or not a, cliched decision. So yes, I have. In terms of talent, it's amazing. It's so difficult to point out, individual names of filmmakers because I'm not in awe of any filmmaker. I respect them, but what is great to see is that you have really budding talent. I mean, every year I watch close to 350 Indian films a year, and in over, like last year, I watched films in 29 languages.
Wow.
And you see all kinds of films being made. You see films where, the passion of the filmmaking, where people are making films because they really want to reach out. They really want to talk about the place they're coming from. They really want to communicate a story. And it's amazing just seeing that amount of passion. So I do not have one or two filmmakers that I
remember you had mentioned that you said India and Brazil are the only countries where we go and we put everything into the film and then it's like half finished. Either that or they don't find distribution.
So the thing is that, filmmaking comes from such a passionate place in India. And also I always... I would say that we have such loving families, that if you have a child who says, I want to be a filmmaker, they can emotionally blackmail their parents and, uncles and aunts to contribute to that project. But I must say that, I do watch a lot of films that get stuck because they're not budgeted well. Also, it's a first-time exercise. A lot of them have started making films without being in the industry, and they've put all their money in, and then there's no money for sound, there's no money for distribution. You have to realize distribution also requires money.
Right.
So you have around the film, if I watch films, I would say only 20% of them will be seen by an audience. And I'm very aware of that fact.
Wow.
And I feel really terrible because very few filmmakers, after making their first film, then realize that the journey has just begun, because how do I get this film out now, And I think filmmaking in other places are more structured because you have producers. Even if it's a debut filmmaker, you usually have a producer who's experienced, and that producer is budgeting everything, waiting for the finances to come, and then you go, you have a go ahead in the process. Here it is, you just go and make the film because right now I just have enough money
for that. Right.
And then it's a bit difficult for them.
So basically I found these statistics that we basically make 1,500 to 2,000 films in this country a
I'm
year.
not surprised.
And in the US they make only 500, and the amount of screens is ridiculous. So in India it's one screen per 96,300 residents, and in the US it's one screen for like 8,000. So the numbers are appalling. So now, given in that situation, does like a film festival help you get an Indian distributor? How do Indian distributors view this?
Film festivals in India, if you go to see film festivals like IFFI, was started off because I think the government did realize that India has a great cinephile audience, and a lot of films will never release in India. So film festivals becomes a space where you can bring in international cinema into India and you can show it to audiences, which is why once a year, for 10 days, audiences come together and watch the best of cinema because they're really interested in what's being made around the year. But it's still audience driven. I think distribution for Indian cinema is is tied with the industry. It's a part of the industry. So if you're making a film within an industry, and we have many filmmaking industries,
right,
in
with
India,
all the languages.
with all the languages, then you already are talking to distributors. But if you have made a film independently, independently basically means you're making a film with all your resources outside the industry. You're not taking money from an industry that exists, a studio that exists. You're putting in independent money. Then how do you approach, distributors? Because audiences in India still are attached to actors.
Right.
We are a fan-based audience. We are a star-driven audience. We need a recognizable face. We are not, crazy about directors as much as we should be.
Should be, yeah.
We really watch cinema as entertainment, and we have defined for ourselves what is entertainment. I think those are the things. Also, I have a theory that the film industry in India is actually the music industry. So film is it actually, both of them come together in what we call the film industry. What remains after watching a great film is the music of the film. What you need to promote a film is great music of the film. And so independent cinema very often thinks that it should not have music because it tends to go towards realism. I don't really agree with these notions.
Right.
But you tend to make more realistic things. Then you find it awkward to put a song in, and then when you make the decision of not putting a song in, how do you reach out to audiences to say that this is a film that is releasing and I need to watch it? There's no visibility because there is no you don't hear anything that reminds you of something. Like, people go and watch films to see how a song is picturized. That's good enough, even if the film is terrible. So we are very connected to our music in our industry, and that could hamper distribution for independent films.
So then what are the solutions? Is it that you go outside the country and you try to cater to a market that's outside of this country for those kinds of films?
That's happened a lot, because when a lot of independent films which have found releases internationally might never find a release in India, and they are known internationally.
Right.
And yes, that is one of the things. And another thing is that if it has won at film festivals, then it does find it easier to have a film release in India.
Okay.
Because
so that does make a difference. I mean, it is recognized in some sense by this market.
Because you do feel that, it has been appreciated outside India, and there is a curiosity value that is linked to it, and you want to watch it then when it comes back because you've read about things that, and social media now really helps with all of that.
Right. And so then, as an independent filmmaker, do you feel like you should be really clear about where you stand, in the sense, go make a film for Bollywood or go make a film for not this country? Is that something that you think? Because there are some films sometimes I feel like, because there's no understanding of the audience, they kind of fall through the cracks. Right? Because it's not made for an international audience. And then, see, like, for example, if a film was made in English, right? An Indian film made in English. Now, if maybe that film doesn't work for that festival circuit, then how is it going to find a release here? So
yeah, I think it's very, I would not like to discourage anyone, because there's no, things are changing so fast. 2 years back, I wouldn't have even imagined a Netflix and an Amazon would come and buy in that many independent films that were, there. They've come in now and they've bought so much content for films which I could have almost said that we'll never see. Because they just need to acquire content right now.
Right.
So the faces that were very sad 2 years back are very happy today. So you never know what might bring in a change, and you cannot ever say that, this is it. But yes, when you're talking about English language films in India, that I find very interesting, because a lot of people do not realize that English is such a dominant language in India. And actually, if you go to see even Bollywood, everyone is more comfortable. Mostly people are comfortable in English than Hindi.
Written in English.
But I think the style of melodrama and the beautiful language that Hindi is, it lends so well to dialogues.
Right.
It lends so beautifully to dramatic situations that somehow English as a language doesn't really work when we want to, express ourselves. We find it's surprising how awkward we are watching ourselves speak in English.
Right.
So it's like we are not comfortable as an audience watching an English speaking audience, and that is something that we need to address.
Maybe that's some kind of weird nationalist colonial thing going on?
I don't know. I think it's also the thing is that, we're too used to things the way they are, I think Ship of Theseus was one of the films that people felt very comfortable watching, though it was in English, but then it takes a lot of great dialogue writing by the director or the writer to understand that this is the tone in which English needs to be spoken, so these challenges are there, but it's more honest to write a film in English if you were thinking in English. I would say so. It is more accurate to depict urban characters in English, in mixed languages. Like you have court having four languages in it, and that is truly Bombay.
That is truly Bombay.
You just say that, oh yes, Bombay is a city in which Marathi, Gujarati, English, Hindi, are spoken. Whereas the other Bombay is a fantasy Bombay, which we see so much in films.
Becoming more and more bizarre.
But that's okay. I mean, cinema is a medium of fantasy, and a lot of filmmakers who come to Bombay from outside have had this fantasy of Bombay, which is the Marine Drive, and which is the city of where dreams are made, and cinema is a great space to express those dreams. So yes, we have to, I think, as an audience, be more open rather than so critical of the intentions of a filmmaker.
So the reason I gave you a 9-pack rating and not a 10-pack was because Bollywood does find its way into the festival circuit as well. So like a film like Haider was screened in Rome. So what is that relationship like?
Yeah.
And again, in MAMI, I think it got a lot of support for the festival from the industry this time around.
Well, Haider in Rome, you can blame me for it.
Blame you?
But I wouldn't say blame because...
Shahid Kapoor fan?
No. Actually, I'll tell you. The thing is that I've always been a great admirer of Vishal Bhardwaj's cinema. And I always wanted to take a film by Vishal Bhardwaj to a festival that I work for, And I remember when Haider came out, I did realize, being the third film of a trilogy, Shakespeare trilogy, it would work so well with European audiences who understand Shakespeare. They totally would get it, and it is so interesting for them to see adaptations, made by a master author in, India.
Right.
You have to realize internationally, Mani Ratnam is very well known. Anurag Kashyap is very well known. You have great directors here, but they don't have that kind of international visibility. And I do believe in, this form that we follow is very unique. We call it Bollywood, okay, and I don't know why it's looked down upon with such disdain. I find it a marvelous film form which is very unique to our country, and it's almost like an opera. We take great stylistic, we are very, very creative in the way we depict love, in the way we depict our emotions, it is, who said that cinema has to be realistic?
Right.
Why should cinema be realistic? I mean, that is one way of making cinema.
I agree with that, but I think the only complaint I guess I have against Bollywood is that it kind of like takes over everything and leaves space for nothing else. Yeah. And that's kind of my big complaint with Bollywood. But otherwise, as a form, it is an interesting form. And there have been some amazing films that have come out.
And when you have a master of the form like Vishal Bhardwaj, a film festival is a great platform to screen it at, to say that, look at the film that's being made there. And of course, by doing that, we do also say that you cannot always be condescending towards what is being made in India.
Right.
There are great works that need to be appreciated, and the effort that's put in is as much, it's the style might be a little different. So, but with the Vishal Bhardwaj, I remember when we saw, I requested Marco to watch Haider. The only problem we had is that being a festival that only showed world premieres, this was not a world premiere, because distribution for a film from Bollywood is already set.
Right, before releases.
And they are also the audience base is so huge that really it's more difficult to get a premiere of a Bollywood film than it is for a Hollywood film.
Wow.
Because Bollywood films are pirated faster. Okay, and they are really the audiences that go to theatres to watch the film because you want to see your star who's really big. And it's not that we're taking any Bollywood film, we're taking one that we think that is, a great good piece of art. And we had shown it at Rome. I still remember. It was the last film that was in that section. And Shahid actually came of his own accord. He was shooting Shandar in Europe, and he was so excited. And he said, I'm coming, to the film. UTV, who brought the film, was a great support. They're very supportive towards their directors. And I still remember I was so nervous whether we would fill the auditorium, because Italy is not a place where you see Bollywood, okay? Right. I was very worried that what if I have Shahid walking down and there is nobody there, and what would I do? So a week before, luckily the film was, literally the last film at the festival. A week before, I took these pamphlets and I took a train to Vittoria, which is in Rome, in a place where you have the South Asian community. And I was going to every grocery store, and I was in the metro. I had a friend who helped me. And we were just giving these pamphlets and telling them, this film, Haider, the star is coming. And they all were like, okay. But, the festival was set in a very elite space where usually the South Asians don't go. So I was, will they really make that, journey to watch him? I didn't know. I happened to go to a Bollywood store. Obviously, it was a store for pirated Bollywood films. And I haven't told this actually to Vishal Bharadwaj or UTV yet, but I went there and the guy was selling DVDs of Bang Bang along with Haider. Okay, and officially the film has not yet released in Italy. That's why it was in the festival. And I saw that as an opportunity, and I said, everyone who asks for this DVD, just give them these vouchers which are 50% off, and tell them the star of the film is going to be there, And I still remember on the day of the premiere, there was a strike, public transport strike. And I didn't see anybody coming, and I was panicking, and we had a dance troupe who actually danced on one of the songs of the festival. And by 7 o'clock when the strike went off, there were hordes of people who came in, and they had banners of spa and things like that, which I was like, oh no, that means they've seen the film. I hope I hope Vishal and Shahid don't realize they've seen the film, because they're holding those banners of the dialogue up. But everything went, and you have a red carpet experience is really, you have to see the way that everything is coordinated by the second, It is a big event because it's covered by international media. It's televised, it's huge. And I remember Shahid and Vishal, they got off of their luxury cars. They walked up, and the ambience was spectacular. I have seen this ambience for Hollywood stars, right. And I was just so excited, and the mood was great. And Shahid danced with the troupe that was there, and I think the screening was delayed by almost 15-20 minutes because of the everything that was happening at the red carpet. We entered the theatre, and it was filled with people, 2,000-seater. Wow. We watched the entire film, and we thought we had a good screening. After that, we went for a dinner, and we said, this is really great. And I think there was another film that was in competition in the same section called Nightcrawler. And there was an audience award that had to be given out, And I had heard that Nightcrawler had won the audience award. While we were having dinner, the festival director gets a message saying, Haider has won the audience award. And we were shocked, We were like, oh my gosh, imagine you have audiences who have opened up. Of course, there were some South Asian audiences, but there were a lot of festival delegates who had come, and all of it had worked well. And Vishal Bharadwaj won the audience award, and we had, it's really a memorable, moment for me. And I would say not in the least bit. When people ask me, I would never ever feel anything but proud of taking a film from our industry, there.
We're getting to the end. I just wanted to ask you if you had any advice for filmmakers.
Well, I would say that, yes, we hear of great successes in debut films. But you have to realize that all debuts need not be successful. You've chosen to be in a profession which hopefully will be your lifelong profession. And if you equate it with other creative professions like say, fashion designing or say being an artist, it's not necessarily that the first show has to be a success. It's not necessarily that your first art exhibit has to be a success. So, do not feel so disillusioned if your debut film is not the resounding success that you aim it to be.
Right.
90% of the times it's not, but keep going and also try to, explore different ways of getting your films produced and financed, but keep working and do surround yourself with people who will actually, tell you the truth about where maybe you could improve as a filmmaker. It's a craft, and you have to be, you can only get better at it if you work hard at it. So
and how do independent filmmakers sustain themselves financially? Like,
see, I do know a lot of filmmakers do advertising on the side. They do corporate films. But then you have to realize also, if you do visit film markets, and it's very important. I mean, you cannot just direct a film on your own and then send a DVD and then hope for the best.
Right.
There are whole systems in place. Try to be more aware of how all of it works, just like anyone in any profession would be aware. They'll go to expos, they will go and meet other people. So I think it's good to be connected to as many filmmakers, learn from them, and visit film markets, because in film markets you will understand how the business works, even for film festivals.
So that's like NFDC's
Film Bazaar,
right? Or
or you can go to Cannes, or you can go to Berlin. We really need filmmakers who go out. Everyone's not going to come here. India is too confusing. Like you said, there are 1,500, 2,000 films being made. Everyone's scared to come into India because they don't know where to begin.
Right.
So if you have the initiative, you want to take your film out, you please go to these markets, connect with other filmmakers. And also I think Europe is a great place for funding for films. There's a possibility of co-producing your film.
Right, there's a lot of that
there's a lot of,
now.
there are script labs. I think you should, if you have a script, apply for a script lab. You'll get a hold of things. Go to co-production markets. Don't always depend on one producer for money. It's great to have 3 or 4 different producers. Learn from people who've done that. And today I think saying I didn't know is really no excuse. We are in the age of the internet. You can Google anything and you'll be able to find solutions.
What's been your biggest learning so far?
I think my biggest learning so far in life or in film programming?
Well, in film programming and how it relates to life, maybe.
Well, I would just say that I really think that it's important to do something that you believe in and to do it really, to put in your best. If you have chosen to do something, go with it. Don't get disheartened by others' projections of what your future could be.
That's
and
very good advice.
Also, I think you're always very young to do something, so don't, I think, I mean, it's okay if you change your profession. I think any profession 2 or 3 years, if you really put your heart and head into it, you'll be able to. And I think be kind to yourself.
Good one.
Yeah.
And do you think films can change the world?
I believe in that. That is why I do what I do. I don't know. I mean, it could not change the world, but it can change someone's perspective.
Right.
And I think that is good enough step to change the world. I think cinema allows you to empathize with different people. I think it allows you to understand emotions through a character or through a story. And I would say it does, because I do see today the difference in attitude towards, perhaps you could see the whole LGBT, issue that's happening has been really something. The change in people's mindset has got a lot to do with what cinema has created.
Right.
The beautiful love stories that you see in across the LGBT spectrum, which has been shown in cinema, and some of the great films really makes you come out and realize that there's nothing abnormal or awkward about it. And I think it just takes one film to do that, and I think that is changing the world. So you cannot undermine cinema as a medium in communicating ideas.
So we're going to wind up the show. I wind up with basically asking you for a film that you would recommend to watch.
There are lots of films.
One that you can say.
It's very difficult, but I don't even know.
Okay, you can pick 3. Does that make it any easier?
It's very tough. I mean, I have watched, and I don't
just say a film you watched recently.
It's not fair to the filmmakers, because I do know that a lot of people do hinge on what we say. Right. And frankly, I would not like to give one filmmaker an advantage over the other, but I would say do attend MAMI and do watch the Indian selection at MAMI. You'll get to watch the best of Indian cinema there.
So my recommendation is Battle for Banaras. It's a documentary by Kamal Swaroop, and it covers the elections in 2014 when Narendra Modi, Arvind Kejriwal, along with the rest of the candidates, there was a Congress and a whole bunch of others. They were fighting it out, and I recommended it because when I was watching it, it's been 2 years since I last saw it, since the election, and I feel like public memory is so short, and that we've almost forgotten that whole AAP wave and the immense hope that came with it, and that there was a political party that was standing on non-divisive lines. So that was interesting to me, that we've completely erased that even in just a span of 2 years. And it was Banaras is a place of spectacle. So I think the elections kind of coincided with that spectacle. So that was very interesting. So that's it. That's our show. So if you have something to add to the conversation, or you want to agree or disagree with anything that we've said today, you can reach out to us at IVM. It's an IVM production. We have a Facebook page. That's it. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepti.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.